Okay, so moving on. This panel is how can brands win with conversational commerce? To answer that question, we have a lineup of some expert speakers. Let's welcome Priyam Chaturvedi. She has over 10 years of work experience in formulating 360-degree marketing strategies with a keen focus on digital content and fashion and e-commerce marketing. Yeah, come on in. Come on in. Give her a little round of applause. Priyam is currently spearheading overall marketing strategy planning for Namshi, the largest e-commerce platform in the Middle East. We have Jonathan Flinder, coming up. Jonathan, acting manager, director, digital from Futtaim. Jonathan started his career 16 years ago. Thank you, yes. Jonathan started his career 16 years ago in France, and then in the UAE at JCDecaux, the world's leading outdoor advertising company. He's worked at Axiom Telecom, Bayut.com, and Mum's World as head of digital before joining Futtaim Group in January of 2020. We also have Misbah Ali. Come on up, Misbah. Currently leads technology at Udrive, one of the region's largest mobility providers. Misbah specializes in building technology teams across different verticals, creating and documenting products, mentoring and leading project stakeholders through agile methodologies and practices. And lastly, our moderator of the panel, Abhinav Mishra, has nearly a decade of experience working with such leading brands in the media such as Bloomberg, Businessweek Middle East, Khaleej Times, and Times of India, and now heads business strategy and commercial at Vibe Projects. One more time for your entire panel. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Brent, for that lovely introduction, and welcome once again to our panelists. Thank you to the audience for being here. Very interesting topic, specifically not because I'm moderating it, but it is a very interesting topic. And just to start off, when I was reading up a bit more for our panel, when Chris Messina coined this term back in 2015, he said a very interesting thing, because everyone's talking about apps, growth, retention, acquisition. He said a very interesting thing, that just because we have screens in our pocket does not allow the brand to force us to look at it to sell their products and services, right? And that's where he said that conversational commerce is going to be the next big thing. From 2015 till 2022 now, in the Middle East at least, it's still the next big thing, right? And I very carefully say next big thing is because while everyone today, especially millennials, they like texting more than they like talking. Even the status on our messenger platforms are like, can't talk, WhatsApp only. But when it comes to your products and services, everyone wants to speak to someone. Everyone wants to meet someone. And they don't think that texting or any other form will probably solve the query. Which brings me to our first question, and I'll start from Priyam, and I'm hoping to get varied answers, but at least the underlying point would be the same. What does conversational commerce mean to you? How would you define conversational commerce?
My short answer would be that for us, conversational commerce means how can I humanize the conversation, right? Especially being in e-commerce, we don't have a face-to-face interaction with the consumer, right? So I can create a really cool looking app, I can create a lot of engagement around it, but when my customer is trying to reach out to me, how can I humanize that conversation? How can I enable the conversation so that at some level when they're thinking of Namshi, they think of a very strong brand ethos, and anytime during the journey, how am I able to say that, hey, this is not just, there is a person sitting at the end of the table who is actually talking to you. So it's not just automation. That is conversational commerce for me.
Great. Jonathan, your smile tells me that you have an answer which would be fun for the audience. Please.
No, so Priyam said that it's the principle of humanizing a conversation. So I have a bit of a different approach. Is if we're trying to humanize, first of all, a conversation is happening between two humans. I think that's the starting point. So what we're trying to do today is replicating conversations happening between humans. So in essence, having a standpoint and an endpoint to a specific topic. So we're trying to achieve something. Sending a one-way message through a bot is not a conversation, right? It's just an ad. So conversational commerce for me is having a topic, an objective, an exchange of messages, and achieving that topic.
All right. Misbah?
So conversational commerce for me is all about driving decision making. we're so preoccupied with our lives and internet and phones and like screens to look at. How do you get your customers, or how do you engage your customers to make decisions while they have partial attention to spare? Whether you use AI ML tools or just regular engagement, it's all about driving that decision making.
So driving decision making for people on the go with a partial attention span makes sense. My next question, and here, Jonathan, I'm going to start with you, is about chatbots. We have a couple of slides, if we can have it up on the screen, about some examples of chatbots, and because Priyam, you also mentioned about you want to send a message that, hey, there is a person at the end of the screen, right? So this, I think, is a sample from what we know as options, as selecting options, and then you have these automated answers. This is a sample from someone who's asking a genuine question and where you can't have an automated answer, right? So again, coming back to what Priyam, Jonathan, you guys mentioned about sending a message about that there's a person at the end of the screen. But when chatbot for a lot of organizations is now increasingly seen as an alternative channel to the existing one, right? And so the service channels that brands have. However, a lot of brands we see fail in identifying the exact point beyond which a chatbot cannot solve a query. And that's why I put up the examples as well. And it needs to probably passed on to a customer care executive, right? How can brands evolve and find this point out and evolve where they do not need to switch to a person in a particular, and everything can be resolved on a chatbot? Starting with you, Jonathan.
I think the first mistake is saying we need chatbots or we need AI, or all those buzzwords that people are very happy to tick a box with, or now we've launched chatbots, and most of the time they're dumb, right? So I think everyone has have had an experience with banks, IVRs from banks, or chatbots on air ticket company, and you're trying to ask something very simple, and you're just running around in circles, just begging for talking to a human. Talking to a human is actually very challenging in some cases. So in a sense, technology and chatbots can be used or should be used to make the customer journey easier, not more complicated. Okay, most of the companies are approaching utilizing AI or chatbots as a way to cut costs or increase revenues, and this is where they're failing, because they're not trying really to solve a customer problem. So we all know that it might be challenging at times to pick up a lot of different phone calls, so we're trying to channel that through chatbots or through IVR menus and all. The issue is most of the people designing this are never trying the solution, right? They are always assuming the happy path, and they are always assuming that people are going to pick up or write whatever the chatbot is expecting or the IVR is expected to have, and they're never considering about the worst case situation, right? Which is happening plenty of times. Yeah. So you're ending up frustrating the customer because you're trying to solve your own problem instead of solving the customer problem. Yeah. So and it's getting extremely irritating, and at the end of the day, what we're trying to do as cost saving end up losing customers. So to do something right is try to build simple use cases, and if it's at first, for example, following up on my order, and the customer will have his order number, you're able to give a status update on an order, that's fine. It's already plenty, and it's a couple of phone calls saved. That's a good starting point. But if you're happy or not happy with the answer, you have to be able to reach out to somebody human who can actually solve the problem. So, and that goes by doing a lot of testing and assuming the worst instead of assuming the best. Right?
Interesting. So, as you said, brands try to solve their problems rather than solving the customer. And just for everyone, if you really want to hear Jonathan's views on chatbots, I think you should just mention off the stage chatbots and AI to him and see what he has to say. Very interesting answers. Coming to you, Priyam, on the same question, how can brands identify that point from, so that they don't have to switch over to a customer care executive later in the chat while you're using chatbots?
So I echo Jonathan's sentiment, because I also think that the key lies in creating a balance, right? It's not an either-or equation that, yes, I need to have a chatbot and check without doing my due diligence on, like, am I equipped as a platform, as a team to actually give a seamless experience to the consumer? Or no, I don't want to go down that road, and I will have, that is sort of a far-fetched dream for me. I think that as a brand, you need to realize what is that sweet spot And the way to go about doing that would be that you sort of read a lot of data and create cohorts, right? You create identifiers to say, here are binary questions that can be answered, which is where a chatbot would come in place, in my opinion. And this is my point where I stop and add a human intervention, because exactly like the examples that we have here on screen, right? Till the time that Sarah was asking yes and no questions, it was an easy journey that yes, are you traveling? Yes, are you traveling alone or with friends, with 4 friends, so on and so forth. The moment she has more questions to sort of ask, that is where the funnel breaks, right? So as a brand, if I'm able to create that balance to say, hey, as long as say my upper and mid funnel of the conversation can happen through a chatbot because I'm equipped to do it. I have done my data crunching and I've identified what are my most frequently asked questions. What is the volume of questions that come from people which can be bucketed into similar buckets and which can be answered through a chatbot? Great. But this is not a race of who comes first, right? It's not that because everyone's doing it. And the panel, the fireside chat that happened just before us, the gentleman was saying that I'm doing it because 4 of my other competitors are doing it is not the answer. The answer is whether I'm ready for it as a platform to serve it to my customer in the language that they understand and in the journey that they're expecting. Otherwise, next time around, Sarah will be really disappointed when she has questions and she has she's talking to a bot.
So you've also given a chatbot lesson, also a life lesson. So you don't have to do everything you don't have to do something just because everyone else is doing it. Thank you. So Misbah, coming to you, I think I want to come to the buzzword which has been in the region for around from 2018, artificial intelligence and machine learning. And according to a leading research agency, only 17% of the marketers use ML in their, when it comes to conversational commerce or in the marketing functions. Now, which shows the gap between what is delivered and what is expected. Why do you think that is the reason, and how can brands use ML in conversational commerce?
I think what brands typically try to do is integrate AI ML in areas where there shouldn't be, right? There's a place for AI ML and there's not, depending on what your niche is, depending on what your industry is, what your region is, and so on and so forth. Where AI ML can really exceed expectations is when you try to understand the conversations that are going around your brand and then try to segment the customer accordingly. Once you have that customer segment, then you can do relevant marketing. But if you just try to, what usually brands try to do is just squeeze AI ML into it, doesn't really give out the result that most people expect.
Fair enough. And as a lead up to that, staying with you, another part of the question, the other very famous technology is the voice tech, right? Yeah. Which is coming. But when it comes to the Middle East, I think voice is a long way off being used the way it should be, or realizing the potential, I would call it. Do you think brands are sleeping on the opportunity to build a greater intimacy when it comes to voice?
Again, that depends highly on what the region and the industry is, right? You've probably seen in the recent years, we've introduced CNAP in the region where if someone calls you, your brand name shows up, right? That has reduced engagement but has increased relevance, if you think about it, right? Brands can use voice as a sales technique as to get surveys and so on and so forth. We at Udrive try our best to get the voice of the consumer through that channel as well. But it's all about how you're engaging it. And if it's done right, with the right, of course there's a time and place for it, but if it's done right, definitely it really drives engagement.
Fair enough. Priyam, what do you have to say about voice, and how can brands use voice to probably build greater intimacy with their customers?
So I don't think brands are sleeping in on the opportunity.
Okay.
It's a very region-specific context, right? So just because globally something's working, maybe the region's not ready for it, right? And you can't sort of say that, yes, this is working somewhere else and therefore let us also do it. So
I
yes,
didn't say
there
it.
is.
I'm just asking.
I mean, yes, there is a lot of potential there, right? But is the audience ready for it? And it needs to be one step at a time. I can't go from 0 to 100 and expect the consumer to react in a way that I want them to react, right? So yes, I think there is a lot of potential there, but are we 100% ready to sort of roll it out to a consumer and have an end-to-end experience? I would say no.
No. Fair enough. Jonathan, I'm going to come to you with something that I started said at the beginning of this panel discussion is that while most of the customers still prefer talking to a human voice rather than using any digital touch point to communicate with brands, research shows that 75% of the customers are more likely to spend with the brand if they message them rather than calling them. Now, how do you explain this paradox? Like, the research says something else, but we want something else. How's that? Are we people giving wrong answers, filling up wrong surveys?
No, I think when you message a brand, probably you're in a different mindset than when you call them, right? Okay, when you're upset, you want to talk to someone immediately, right? You don't want to talk. You don't want to complain to a machine. You want to complain to a human being. So it's likely when you're calling, you have an issue to solve. You're not in the mindset where you're supposed to buy something. You're calling because your order is late. You're calling because you want to change your plane ticket. You're calling because you can't find a store. Your item is damaged. That's totally different. When you're messaging, you're looking for information, you're looking for a recommendation. So I think that's the starting point. At the same time, we know that the new generation, the millennials, for example, don't like to talk. They actually hate calling, right? They have issues of entertaining a verbal communication on the phone. There are plenty of research which are showing so they would rather text. Of course, the experience, once again, need to be able to follow and offer a good quality exchange.
Misbah, what is your view on, the difference in what people want and what the research says?
I think it's all about who you're targeting. Again, it's so subjective to what your target market is, how young the target market is. Like Jonathan said, if it's if you're targeting primary millennials, they don't really like to talk, right? It also speaks volume on what are you calling about. If your brand is infamous for just cold calling and sales calling, your engagement's overall going to go down anyway.
Which brand isn't infamous for cold calling?
Udrive.
Yeah, sorry.
No, but the idea is there's a time and place for voice, and there's a use case for it. If you try to use that in line with traditional methods, it might work, might not, depending on what your culture is.
Jonathan, coming back to you, when you talk about in-app messaging, it has startling 75% open rate, which is way higher than a marketer's favorite form of communication, whose death has been announced several times over the email, right? Why do you think that brands are still not able to make the most out of it?
First of all, I'm a bit curious about the 75% open rate and to qualify what is in-app messaging. It's like a bot pop-up coming in or a pop-up in the middle of the screen that you have to click on anyway to be able to close it. So it's I would question that metric, but I think why brands are hesitating is because every person who's data-driven and into the e-commerce sphere is extremely careful when it comes to interrupting a purchase journey. Right?
Okay.
When there is something coming up on screen, which could be a recommendation, which could be give me your email and I give you 10% off, or which could be I don't know, whatever is interrupting your purchase journey is dangerous. You don't want to drive people out of your app or your website. You don't want to take them to another page. You don't want to interrupt that. So for people who are data-driven, I think they're just careful and they're just trying to find the right way, if, again, relevant, to have in-app messaging, right, or when relevant. The other one might have had very bad experience as well, right? So again, there's plenty, hundreds, thousands of features which are available nowadays. It doesn't mean we have to use them all, right? In-app messaging does have a lot of value. For example, when you see a user pattern of browsing a lot of different pages, landing on product detail pages, maybe at that end, at that time, that person needs a proper advice, which a very well-designed machine learning algorithm could come up with and suggest right products, or with a human being at the opposite of the spectrum. And I think maybe it would come with an additional questions, but too often we see customer service teams as just a way to solve problems, but very rarely as a profit center. Customer service people who are actually attending, to customers' issues, they do know a lot about what customers like, what they've purchased. They are able to provide recommendation, and they are able to sell services. So too often we're not utilizing them for the, the right things, I think.
So basically, we're coming back to the point where we need to do stuff what people want, not we want to do as a business, right? Fair enough. Priyam, coming to you, last but definitely not the least, will conversational commerce actually help brands increase their brand value, or do you think it's just another tool for growth?
It's a bit of both, right? I mean, it is an enabler for conversion. So in that sense, yes, it will always help your growth. So it would be considered as a growth channel, right? More and more brands here are looking at WhatsApp as an example and moving towards that. And a lot of times, like Jonathan also said, that people reach out whenever there's a problem, right? If every time I'm stuck with something is when I reach out. So in that sense, yes, it becomes a growth enabler. However, at the same time, depending on how the experience you have as a customer with the brand, it also becomes a brand conversation. So if, like say 5 on 5 times I am interacting with brand X and I have great sort of experience even while I'm just talking to them, I have more faith in the brand, and that just helps me create a more positive ethos of the brand in my head. So the next time I'm sort of thinking about something, it pretty much acts as my top of mind, saying, hey, this brand has a really good brand experience, so I can trust the brand, and therefore it becomes a brand conversation. So in my opinion, it's a bit of both.
So since you've made the answer very subjective, it's a bit of both. Let me put the other way. Do you think conversational commerce is more about, as you said, people reaching out when they need it, or do you think it's more about having that great communication or great engagement experience no matter what the reason when they're interacting with the brand?
So I would say that it would be more of an engagement channel if I just had to choose between the two, right?
I wanted you to.
It's not always the point is that we don't want, as a brand, I don't want it to be a one-sided conversation that someone's only reaching out to me to say, hey, my order is not delivered, or there's a delay, or XYZ things, right? I also want that, like in an ideal situation, I would want to use that channel to say, can I create experience around the brand? Can I give you, say for Namshi, can I give you styling advice basis what you've purchased in the past? Can I tell you that, hey, you bought this shirt, but these pair of shoes that are launched on Namshi go really well with your purchase, or you purchased, say, from my analysis, we know that you are an Adidas NMD customer. So next time there's a drop, I can sort of reach out to you proactively and say, hey, you know what, here's your chance to pre-order something. So that while the end goal will be conversion, I will use it as an engagement tool so that it's not just a one-way conversation where you're only reaching out to me when Namshi's not delivered your order.
All right. Jonathan, is it a growth tool, or is it something that will actually help brands increase value?
I think it's all down to context, right? So it starts first with an understanding of the context and engaging a conversation with the right context around it. Am I here to give an advice, or I'm here to solve a problem? And if the first layering and analysis is good, you have an opportunity to create a great conversation.
Great. Misbah?
Well, conversational commerce doesn't always have to be about selling a product, right? So I think there is a huge opportunity for people to grow their brand value with conversational commerce, and I think a lot of the brands globally are doing a really good job at it, where I would probably end up choosing a brand which I know that I can reach out to and is more responsive to me, even if their product is subpar, right? So if done right, and there's a lot of brands in FMCG, there's a lot in retail that are doing this well, some in North America, not a lot in this region, but yes, definitely there's if you do it right, your brand value can go viral.
All right. Thank you so much. We have a couple of minutes left. Just want to check, although it was not a part of the plan, does anyone have any questions from the audience? If anyone wants to ask anything? No? Everyone has all the answers regarding conversational commerce. Great. Thank you so much, Priyam, Jonathan, and Misbah. Pleasure having you. And please give a big round of applause for our panelists today. And thank you so much for tuning in.